accepted.
Fourth year student?
Third, kind of fourth.
So you're one of those, yeah, sort of mixing it in. What brings you here as a fourth year student?
I was always interested in doing multiple choice because it was something I feel that read that was kind of confident when it comes to multiple choice. I got doctor graded as well as I thought I would do. So I was wondering,
How did, you're going to be a very important person, so I have some suggestions for you there. How many of you see second year often you're facing a lot of those kind of multiple choice questions? I'm going to start off by sort of addressing one of the major myths we have for multiple choice questions at the university. And maybe you've heard this, where people will say, multiple choice are easy because all you have to do is recognize the answer, right? The answer is one of those options, and all you need to be able to do is recognize it when it's there. So you don't need to be able to recall the way you would on an essay question. You just need to be able to recognize it. You've heard that? And the problem is this is an absolute myth. And there's lots of research that's been done to show the same skills that are involved in writing a short answer or essay question are tapped by multiple choice. We don't design multiple choice at the university level to be answered using recognition. And I have an example. So I'm going to ask you to answer the following questions. So pick your answer. I know it's not your area of research, but maybe what we can do, you may find, see what I'm expressing here. So here's multiple choice question number 1. There's going to be 4 options, so pick your best option. Bob has a headache. What should he take to get rid of it? A, Rolaids. B, Imodium. C, Tylenol. D, Neocitrin. So how many of you are picking C? Okay, 100%. Now this is definitely recognition. You didn't need to study pharmacology, but you can recognize one of those things goes with headaches quite well. And so that's sort of what students, or the myths, sort of feeds into. All you need to do is recognize the drug that goes with headaches, and you're fine. But here's what we actually would ask at the university level. So this time, try to see if you can pick the answer. Bob is a 42-year-old male who has a cluster headache. What should he take to get rid of the pain? A, aspirin. B, ibuprofen. C, Tylenol. D, Tylenol with caffeine. Now, what's the problem with this question in terms of answering it? Exactly. It's not a case of reckoning. All of these medications are pain medications. I know people have taken all of these for headaches, but which one is the one that Bob should take? And there's some key information. He's a 42-year-old male. He has a cluster headache. In order to answer this question, you have to know what a cluster headache is and what it does in the brain and what those drugs do and how that corresponds to the medication or to the cluster headache. And then you also have to know, is there a gender effect, which there is, by the way, in pain medication. So you would have to know all of that stuff. And believe me, if you could answer that, you could write a short answer on that question, because you could say this is what a cluster headache is, and here's why ibuprofen is the best choice for Bob. So that's one of the problems with this idea that multiple choice is tapping into recognition. It absolutely is not in most of the questions you're going to encounter. So this means something very important. It means that a lot of students, when they're preparing for multiple choice, will study very differently. So what they'll do is they will just reread notes and the text chapter. How many of you do this? You reread and then you write out the notes. How many of you are note rewriters? So you rewrite your notes, right? And what you do, and this is how you test yourself. So you get your study sheets all nicely written, and you do this, and you go, a cluster headache is, and then you go, cluster headache. Yes, I got that right. So you're constantly going back to your notes and referring to them as you're studying, right? And then the problem comes, the exam happens, and where are your notes? Away. And what has happened is the recognition isn't helping you. Everything's looking the same. Everything's looking like a possibility, or at least 2 or 3 of the options are. So all of a sudden, your recognition is not helping you on this test. And if this is your study method for a multiple choice test, you're toasted. It's not going to work for you. Now, what's really interesting is that generally, and this is consistent with our research, as soon as people know it's a short answer test, they don't study that way anymore. They realize they're going to have to write stuff out. So often they will practice writing things out. And this is going to be very key. You need to make sure, first of all, to do well on multiple choice at the university level, that you're not studying for recognition, you're studying for production. You have to be able to regurgitate that information, to produce it on the test, the same way you would with a short answer. And I have a study method that I can talk to you about to do that. So do you want to hear about the study method first, and then I'll talk about some other techniques? So, I'm a really lazy person, and when I was an undergraduate here at Trent, I didn't want to rewrite notes. I hated rewriting notes. You know what? Because you spend a lot of time. And they're beautiful. I've seen beautiful notes. How many of you color code your notes? Like you have highlighter and underlining, and they're beautiful. They're like, and you rewrite them over and over again, so it's like, oh. And it's a lot of work. But the problem is that rewriting notes is not the same thing as studying. And when I was working with other students, because I eventually became a tutor, both here and at grad school, it's kind of like, oh gee, you have the most beautiful notes I think I've ever seen, but what do you actually know? Because the problem when you're rewriting is oftentimes you got the music, you can do it anywhere, right? And you're just rewriting these beautiful notes, but you're not actually absorbing the information. It's a passive technique. So rewriting, there's nothing about writing that actually gets it into your long-term memory. So I decided, because I was so lazy and I will not rewrite notes, what could I do to reduce down my workload for studying? And the very first thing I did was I would take a list of the topics that were fair game. So I would go through and I would just say, what are the topics, the research studies that I should know for this test according to the professor? So I would just go through and compile like a list of topics. Then what I would do is I would say, all right, Smith-Chant, before you actually crack any books, before you actually start studying, take one of those topics and write down everything you can remember about it. So one of the things I would do is, let's say, okay, psychology, the definition of psychology. And I would be able to say, okay, psychology is the study of behavior and mental processes. And I knew the definition of psychology. And there was also Freud. Freaky Freud from my course, you know, famous Freud. I remembered a lot about Freud. And there was all kinds of topics that I remembered without any studying. It was already up in my head because I enjoyed the lecture and it was there. So what happened was when I could write it out, now I would do this point form, no prettiness, on just scrap paper, everything I could remember about the topic. And then if you can remember it and you can regurgitate it without any studying, what should you now do?
Skip to the next topic.
Skip to the topic. So what I would be left with is get rid of the stuff that's already up here and focus on the stuff you couldn't get anything on the paper. So let's pick Watson. Maybe Watson was one that, from psychology, that you just didn't have. It's like, I don't know who this guy is. That's where you should be studying. The problem with rewriting your notes is most students rewrite all of their notes, but they're rewriting the stuff they know along with the stuff they don't know. And there's another problem with students that I've seen, and even the best students do this. You tend to gravitate to what you love. So we tend to like to spend more time on the stuff that we like, and that's usually the stuff you understand and the stuff you would remember even without any effort. What's going to screw you up on an exam is not what you know, it's what you don't know. So the SPEW method that I outlined is, first, write everything out you can remember on each topic, and then if you can regurgitate that on command, that's why I call it the SPEW method, put it out. That's not stuff you need to study. You need to work. And you see, I've already reduced my workload. Depending on how much you pay attention in class and how well you read, you might be able to spew in a first year course maybe 20%, in some of the upper year courses maybe even 80%. And what we're trying to do is get to the stuff you don't know.